See myself. Hello, and welcome back to our first show of the year for Thank You Five. Thank You Five is a weekly show hosted by Straw Dog Theater Ensemble members, where we invite artists from all across the globe to talk about live theater and digital storytelling with a spirit of gratitude and innovation. I'm Jannard. I'm going to be your host tonight. I am an Straw Dog Ensemble member, vocal warm-up, Straw Dog Ensemble member. I am also a Bramble Theater Ensemble member. I've been living in Chicago as a working actor for the last 12 years, and hopefully for much, much, much longer. Yeah, I pretty much am that. I'm an actor. We'll branch out at some point. Um, uh, Chase, tell the world who you are.
Hi, I'm Chase Whedon Morley. I've been in Chicago for about 9-ish years now. Primarily actor, but in more recent years, I've been adding playwright to that, to what I do. So yeah, actor slash playwright. I'm very excited to be here. I'll popcorn over to Eileen.
Awesome. I'm Eileen Tull. My pronouns are she, her, and I've been in Chicago for a long time as well. I came here for college, so I'm not gonna admit what year that is to myself yet, like how long ago that is. And I have done, as many people in Chicago, have worn a lot of different hats, both in front and behind the table. Um, I'm a solo performer, a theater educator, and a theater director. I have recently founded a artistic collective called Fat Theater Project. Um, and yeah, so a lot of different slashes in sort of my roles as well. And I will popcorn it over to Dabrina.
Hi, everyone. I'm super happy to be here. I am Dr. Dabrina Sandifer. I am the founder and executive artistic director of Esurient Arts. I'm based in Houston, Texas. I was born and reared in Houston, Texas as well. And I'm primarily a director and producer. I do have a background in acting. I do that occasionally. The last time I did it was more so film acting. But through Esurient Arts, we also do facilitation and consultancy for organizations throughout the country. Majority of that is arts organizations, some not so what. Not so much rather. I also use art for social impact and social activism, which ties into my background in mental health and community development through affordable housing, so on and so forth. And again, I'm happy to be here. And I'll pop it over to Kelly.
Thank you. I'm Kelly Strickland. I'm the executive artistic director of a performing arts center in Green Bay, Wisconsin. I've been here for about 6.5 years. I've worked in the arts and culture space for over 30 years now. My first gig as an actress in storefront theater was in 1992 at Zebra Crossing, which is going, you got to get out the Richard Christensen book on theater history in Chicago to find that one. But was affiliated with and worked with many, many companies in Chicago over about 20 years with some forays to Washington, D.C. at the Kennedy Center for a period of time.
Awesome. Well, we are very happy to have all of you guys, some of you again, for tonight's show. I want to start off by the question that we ask every episode. What is theater to you? Um, I'll start off by saying giving my answer. Theater, for me, is a place, if done correctly, where honesty and truth and whatever that looks like is theater is a place where honesty is allowed. It's a place where I think it is judged. It's a place where it is welcomed. It's a place where uh, we are able to sort of not code switch uh, in a way that shows the world this is me getting what I want. Um, I think as humans, that's typically what we're doing, going for what we want or what we need. And theater allows us or me as a performer to ignite that, to see what that feels like. And it's a reminder to an audience of what it's like to do that. Um, uh, uh, as an artist, I always quote James Baldwin, who's a writer, but I feel like it is one of the greatest gifts of an artist is to remind people what it is to be alive, what it is to be human. And I feel like I'm honored every single time I'm able to take a stage, um, and I'm able to embody someone's commitment to getting what it is they want. And that doesn't always look good, and that doesn't always feel good. But the theater creates a space in which I can do that, and I come out alive at the other end, and I'm able to connect with other humans who've seen or uh, who have witnessed that pursuit. Anyone else?
Yeah, I would say I I work as an educator. I teach kids, adults, and seniors, and I teach a lot of different creative classes, including acting, theater, improv, things like that. And I get folks who are experienced, folks who are brand new, kids who have never done theater before, retired people who are kind of like, oh, I might as well try it. And I always try to emphasize that theater is not to be too oversimplify it, but it's playing. You're playing. We all played all the time as kids, and we all used our imaginations, and we all ignored. We had no sense of self-consciousness of like looking stupid or having a bad idea. We just when you were young, you just kind of used to tell stories and be a dragon and do all kinds of crazy things. And I think theater gets us back to that sense of play. And it can be joyful and imaginative and fanciful, but it can also be something more dramatic, something deeper, um, something that reflects the real world in for all the good and bad ways. Um, but I feel like that's what's always really important to me is to keep that sense of play and pliability in it.
Awesome. Anyone else want to chime in?
Yeah, I'll kind of speak to my unique draw to theater. For me, what makes theater exciting is because it is one of the, if not the only medium of storytelling where the storyteller and the audience are experiencing the story at the same time. Where you may have like a novel or a movie or TV show, the story that you are consuming as the audience is several like months, even years separated from the storyteller telling that story. It's gone through editing, it's gone through all sorts of like production and that kind of stuff and processing by the time it gets to you. But what's really cool about theater is that the actors and storytellers are there with the audience in the room, and the telling of the story and the consuming of the story is happening simultaneously. And there's a really, exciting energy in that that draws people in. For me, that kind of speaks to what that unique spark of this particular medium of art is, and that's always been very exciting to me.
Yeah, one thing that I do want to just I appreciate you including the audience. There's something about the energy that the audience brings that is so magical and sometimes it can feel harmful because we've all done a show where the audience does not care or just is not agreeing. And they either vocalize that or the energy just feels off. And like as a group of a collective of actors pushing through that show, there's something about that energy that you have kind of like trying to pull the audience in, or there's something about an audience that freaking loves the show and it lifts it and and carries it. There's that dynamic is just completely unbelievable that in a lot of mediums, theater isn't the only medium, but in a lot of mediums, we don't really get that. Like I don't necessarily think you'd find that in a gallery or I don't know. Uh, yeah, I just want to stress the importance of an audience, um, the importance of an audience for a theatrical piece. Um, Dr. Sandifer, what's theater to you?
Sure. So I also have a heavy background as an arts educator as well.
Hmm.
And so I love the point that Eileen made. But in addition to what you all have said, theater to me is a gumbo of the other art forms while having its own X factor as well. Theater is a change agent to me because, when people watch television or a movie, like it's okay for them to talk more, be on their phone, whatever. Theater is intimate. So in that space where we're sharing time, energy, and literal space, you are forced to sit there and receive these characters' experiences quietly. You have to digest it. You have to receive it. It forces us to listen. And so to me, it's a change agent because when you're forced to listen, when you're forced to experience something intimately and viscerally, to me, that thing has the power to help to fragment and eradicate ignorance or perceptions that we've made up in our minds about people or demographics or situations without the lived experience. Theater to me is also, and again, I respect everyone's belief system, but theater to me is a place where God frolics. It's a sacred space to me. If you believe in a higher power, to me, that's the first artist. It's why, no matter the belief system, it's often referred to as the creator. To me, it's a space where God frolics and exhales. Theater to me is it is a space that brings us all together because we all understand emotion and life, no matter our differences or language barriers or whatever else. And theater is a place that allowed me to find and explore my voice. It's a place that is a conduit of empathy. And it's one of my favorite places ever.
That was a wonderful, wonderful response. I'm gonna end it with you, Kelly.
I think I probably I would take the statement that the audience, emphasizing the importance of the audience a little bit further to say it really is in service of the audience. It's any moment where artists are in a shared physical space with an audience trying to capture a moment of honesty. And those moments of honesty can, be loaded with the desired impact of escapism or education or social change or, any variety of reasons for doing it. But to me, I try actually very hard to not have a lot of opinions about what theater is, because I think that I get taught all the time by people what their understanding of a theatrical experience is. And that's probably different now than it was 30 years ago, when I viewed the arts from, I would say, more exclusively an artist perspective.
Yeah, that and thank you everyone for your marvelous responses. And that makes me think. Our perceptions of theater change. I know personally, one of the reasons I entered into the theater was because I was just like, I want to do that. I feel like I'm that actor who was like, I feel like I could do a better job than that person. And that's what introduced me. And now it feels, as a 36-year-old man, it feels completely, absolutely different. Um, Now, I wanted to ask, a lot of you are in leadership roles, whether that's artistic direction, education, you're a company member somewhere. Um, with your experience in the past, when I was a child, I definitely had perspectives of what theater could do for me, or what is the role. Um, uh, right now, if there is something that you can express to um, someone who finds themselves either under your guidance or under your leadership in whatever capacity, what is important for you um, to enlighten them uh, based on your experience and about theater based on your experience in it. Um, I know, Kelly, you just said, I don't want to tell someone, what to define what it is for them. But certainly I would imagine there's something that you'd like to sort of nudge them, get a little, a little something based on, maybe something that you hadn't been taught that you wish you had been. That was like a 45-minute question, but what would you say you have to offer, maybe that you weren't given as an early artist? And this is to everyone.
Yeah. So in addition to organizational leadership, I also work as I'm a member of a coaching collective for national art strategies, and I coach arts leaders all over the country. And I think that this question since March of 2020 is a very different question than it was before then. In some good ways, I think, in some dismantling of an industry that was built on a lot of inequitable practices, on a canon that was limited in the number of voices that it reflected. I think there is much good change, but one thing that has not changed, I don't think, and this kind of goes to Eileen's point, really everyone's point, if you don't feel the joy in the making of it, regardless of the intent of the work, regardless of the nature of the work, if you don't experience a very deep level of gratification and joy that is about who you are as an individual and not about competition with your peers, you're not going to have a very satisfying career. And it's too hard of a career pursuit to not make sure that you have a real touchstone to that piece of it.
And it's also not alarmingly lucrative as an art, as a career. So I think a lot of that, you know, the kind of passion, and this is the tough thing, I feel like, and this is not what you're saying, Kelly, but I think a lot of times people are like, well, your passion will be the thing that propels you. You don't need to get paid. You love it so much. And for a long time, especially like in my 20s, I was like, I do love it so much. I'll do whatever for how, like, I'll carry dangerous things, and I'll, you know, walk home late at night, and, you know, for a $8 stipend. And it's a balance, right? You know, you have to have this kind of passion and joy that can fuel this, especially I think on an organizational level. You know, leadership has to embody that so that everybody feels that. But on the other hand, it's also about trying to find the logistically sustainable things. And I think if I had to kind of give a piece of advice to either a younger person or a younger version of myself, is there are a million reasons why you're getting rejected, and most of them don't have anything to do with you. I was an actor for a very short amount of time. And mostly because auditioning, I truly couldn't, I can't handle it. So I went up into to stand up briefly. I feel like it's auditioning on a different kind of scale, where at least, you know, you don't even have to walk out of the room to know if you got the part. If you're succeeding or failing, you know, that audience will be right there letting you know. And, you know, it's just so interesting, having been doing more casting in recent years, and just seeing the plethora of talent and the incredible people, and like people I really wanted to meet and work with. And there are just only a certain amount of spots. There is only a certain amount of roles in the script. There is, you know, the schedule is on Mondays and you can't do Monday, you know, like for whatever reason it is. So some of that rejection doesn't have anything to do with you, which is, I'm saying it and I'm looking at myself as I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Dabrina, oh, sorry. Go for it,
I
Chase.
I was just gonna say, for me, I would emphasize for, you know, any young artist, and especially young me going into the theater industry, that, you know, it's always important to remember that there is no prescriptive path to success, nor is there any singular path for success, or success doesn't look like any one thing. And um, and I would also emphasize like a direction towards your own personal happiness and fulfillment, when it comes to measuring what feels successful to you. Because if it's, you know, money, you can always make more money. There's always more money to be made. You will never feel like you have enough. Same thing with like acclaim or fame. But like, um, you know, if one path leads towards more, you know, satisfaction or fulfillment or happiness, and the other one leads towards more money, or, you know, what looks like what you think success looks like, the path towards like happiness and fulfillment will always pay more dividends to you. And there is no shame in choosing a path that, you know, gives you the same, or what feels more reciprocal to what you put into it. There is no obligation to, you know, to toil and, you know, put in exceptional hours for something that is not giving you what you feel like you're putting into it. If you feel like you need to back away from that for something else, is equally valid. And there was another point that I had. And yeah, and how so much of theater happens off stage as well and outside of the audition rooms. Like there are as many connections and deals and decisions being made in after parties or at coffee interactions or uh, hanging out with other directors and actors and artists in the city that can get you in rooms that just cold call auditions really can't do. And that there's, like Eileen says, so many different plethoras of reasons that kind of move you in one direction or the other that sometimes are outside of your control. But um, the the best way to kind of give yourself more opportunities is to continue to plant seeds of good, strong relationships with people and with institutions. And that if you keep doing that, later down the road, those seeds will sprout in ways that you couldn't anticipate. But yeah, that's kind of what I would like emphasize to artists who are entering this field.
Awesome. Is there any sort of theater or uh, digital storytelling that any of you have seen recently that may have struck a chord in a positive or negative light that you care to share or talk about? Um, uh, I'll just throw just a quick example. There's a lot of hissing and hawing about the Color Purple movie that came out on Christmas of last year. And I thought it was absolutely incredible. I've seen the original, the Steven Spielberg. I've seen the Broadway show, and now this. I thought it was absolutely beautiful, and my astrologically, I'm a Pisces, Cancer, Cancer, but I have not cried in a long time, and this movie uh, sort of let that out for me, which I just think is huge because whatever. And it was at this one of the final moments where Fantasia or Celie says like my family's here. Um uh and I think that came from her working so hard to sort of like establish those roots for herself. Um and just the reward of the joy of seeing her get that. Um uh, at the very very end. But I was just wondering if there's any sort of creative spark that you guys have seen lately that have like sort of moved something in you at all.
Speak to that same Color Purple point. So the original Color Purple movie came out before I was born, but according to my mother, even because so I grew up in a household. I grew up in an artistic household. I'm not the first generation or person in my family to be a creative. So I was exposed to different things appropriately, but still kind of openly. So long story short, according to my mom, when I was a toddler, I would request to watch that film and I was allowed to. So I guess even then I was into social impact, generational trauma and exploring that. And maybe I was a director then too, because even as a kid, I would watch things and go, that needs to be different or da da da. But anyway, to see this version of it, despite, and I respect everyone's differing opinions, I think they did do a good job of merging something that was originally a novel and something that was also on Broadway and something that is a very known film from the 80s and kind of meshing that together in a way that made sense. It was visceral for me. I did cry for Miss Celie, but also Miss Sophia. Again, as a person of color and knowing what it's like to be punished or mistreated for defending yourself or for having just a standard or just some level of a self-esteem. Even though I know the plot and I know the story, it still hit me. But I think it's awesome, even for the actors who were involved, like Fantasia, to explore such a, and she's done it on Broadway before, sure, but to explore this as her first film where she's not portraying herself, what an opportunity. Even for, you know, Danielle, who's in it, how she became a part of that process via referral from the guy, Corey, I forget his last name, because they did it before in college. Beautiful, 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 which also, and I'll speak to the previous question real quick because it's related to me. I encourage people to not be a one-trick pony, not in a way to where you're all over the place, but if you want opportunities that no one is giving to you, or you see that you feel like this could be done in a different way, and you're willing to put in the sweat equity and all of that legwork, then do it. Because ultimately, sitting back and waiting for someone to create the perfect opportunity for you may never come. So at this point, I'm very obedient to, yes, my passion, but I find my purpose in it, because passion alone is not sustainable. It's not. And again, as a person of color, I'm not willing to suffer from compassion fatigue, burnout. I'm not willing to suffer from that, not one more day again in my life. And I stand 10 toes on that. So at this point, my work in leadership and being a company member for Mildred's Umbrella Theater Company and the executive coaching that I've done for Americans for the Arts and all of that, those are acts of servitude, because there's someone that's coming behind me, and I want them to have what I didn't. I had great people, I had great things, but I had to crawl through glass a little bit in some moments. And I think it's unnecessary. So I would say everyone doesn't have to be a martyr. Everyone doesn't have to do everything from an act of community, but you owe it to yourself to be obedient to the purpose in your particular passion, even if it does not look like however blah, blah, blah person would define it. Your vision doesn't need a cosign. It just doesn't. You need buy-in, you need relationship, yes, but it's not for everyone to understand in the moment that it's bubbling in you. And so figure out how to make it work for you. Figure out how to make these other skills that you've done in other jobs. How is that transferable to theater? If you were a secretary or paralegal, how can those skills be relevant to you making sure that your contracts are better, or whatever the case may be? And then also in theater, because for me, once upon a time, I would work on 3 and 4 shows at once, and that's not sustainable. I got to a point to where I was ill. I have the flu. I have a respiratory disease as well. And I was at the doctor's office, and they told me, we think you may have blood from your lungs. You have to leave here and go to the emergency room now. I went to the theater because my cast and my stage manager acted like they just couldn't fully function if they just didn't feel my soul in the building. Never again.
Jesus.
Never again. Never, never, never. So with that, you know, you can get burned out doing show after show after show. So figure out, hey, if you have this niche, if you have a whatever, how can you contract those services out? Have you made templates of documents and things that other people need? How can you contract out? And so for me at this point, not only producing and all of that, but again, the facilitations that we do, applying things that we do in theater to non-arts organizations, because it still works. Theater brings people together. It's teamwork. I just make my passion work better for my purpose, and my purpose to work better for me to keep the lights and such on. So that's what I'd say.
Yeah.
Beautiful answer. For those of you who may be watching, Dabrina, you are frozen, but we definitely heard you loud and clear. And I thank you for that. But Dabrina, is outside of that, were you actually, I think you did answer this. Eileen or Kelly or Chase, any sort of theater work or digital storytelling piece that you've seen recently that has sparked that has ignited any sort of anything for you?
Yeah. I'll give sort of a comparison of two pieces, because I think kind of as Dabrina was just mentioning, about needing to keep the lights on, both in your own home and at your theater, resources are so important. You can do, yes, you could do theater with just like a black box and an actor and a lot of heart, but a lot of times you want lights and you want a little set piece and you want things going on. So I went and saw, and a few other folks on the call were at this performance as well. I saw an original musical at a bookstore. The Understudy in Chicago is a great, somewhat new theater, bookstore, coffee shop, and now performance venue as well. They've been doing some performance events, but this was their first full show. And I think they certainly had like a set and they had lights and they had all, a lot of really interesting things, but it was a theater in a bookstore. So certainly non-traditional, playing upon that closeness to the audience. There was a full band in the back, but you just mostly had these two actresses singing and acting their asses off. And like, that was the spectacle. And then just last night, I went and saw Richard III at Chicago Shakespeare Theater, which has a little bit more space than a bookstore, a little bit more cash flow, which is a very large theater here in Chicago. And it was a really magnificent production. I would highly recommend it. The lead, oh, now I'm blanking on her name, but the lead actress playing Richard is fantastic. And it is a bit more spectacle. They've got dozens of people on stage. There's the lighting is pretty off the, not off the wall, but like the lighting's not subtle. The violence is not subtle. There's a lot of, just lavish kind of things about that show. And what I love about Chicago, especially, is that there you can see shows on that extreme of having $1 million year budget, or I don't even know how much Chicago Shakespeare has. I could guess, but I don't know.
Many more than 1 million.
Right, right. 1 million per audience member. Right. They've got a huge budget. And then we have a show that, again, I don't know what their budget was, but it was probably in the low thousands, if at all. So, but you can still make magnificent theater on either of those levels. So to me, it was just kind of a reminder of, I sure would love to have $1 million to make theater, would make a whole lot easier the whole time. But, so much I think of, again, a lot of the DIY scenes that I've been a part of in the Bay Area and in Chicago, you are cobbling things together. You're trying to make it work. You're trying to figure out, what do I have in my closet? What can we get out of the alley? And like that, you can make really fun, exciting theater that way. But on the other hand, you can also make really exciting, you can make exciting theater with money. And yeah, money is nothing to sneeze at. Bless you.
Tracy, you were gonna say?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, when we were talking about digital pieces or storytelling, that kind of sparked something with us. There's a YouTube documentary that I saw not too long ago that really, really like kind of changed my perspective on a few things. Where the YouTuber goes on a deep dive to look for the person who created the theme music to the Disney Channel. Like if you were to watch the Disney Channel, like, after when they cut to a commercial break and they say like, we'll be right back, and it goes bam 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 bam, and that 4-note like progression was written by somebody. Somebody sat down in front of a keyboard and plunked that out, and that was used in every single bumper. And so this YouTuber who's like a huge, their whole channel is like investigating, stuff in Disney and just kind of picking apart and investigating all these things about like Disney. And the video is about like, I don't know, like feature length, film length, 90 minutes to 120. I don't know how long, but they go on a deep dive, reaching out to people, digging into like the coding of like the videos, going in the Wayback Machine. Like it's an intense investigation. And just trying to find the human who came up with this ubiquitous piece of music that has stuck with so many millennials growing up watching the Disney Channel. And it kind of struck me that something so ubiquitous, so well known, something that sticks in the heads of like millions of children, we don't know that person's name. Or if you were to ask someone, they'd be, I don't know. I just kind of took it for granted. And that in so many aspects of, the world around us, where we don't normally think of like artistry, like a billboard or the cover of a magazine, there are artists who are making these things happen, who are designing these things. There are musicians that are writing and composing the bumpers on radio commercials. Someone is writing the script for commercials, and their stuff gets seen by millions of people, but they themselves are not known. And so in the world of like theater and film and television, we are drawn so much to names of people who have kind of floated to the top and that we know by name. But there are still thousands and thousands of countless other artists who work so hard and that their work does get seen, but they are essentially unknown. And it really kind of changed my perspective on where you can make artistry happen. And when after watching that, I would kind of like step outside, and wherever I looked around, I would think somebody made that. Some person, and I don't know their name, and I probably will never know their name. And if I tried to find their name, I probably wouldn't be able to find it. But there is a human who made this thing that I'm looking at, who designed that. And it made me feel a little more hopeful that like, even if someone doesn't know my name, even if I will not be known by people, the work that I do could still live on past me and reach people in ways that I cannot predict. It is a really, really great video documentary. And I see Eileen is nodding. I think she's, have you also seen that one?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So I've got it kind of pulled up on a different window. I'll just say the name really quickly because I think every person, every artist in general should like see it. I think it's called Disney Channel's Theme, A History Mystery. It is well worth the 90 minutes to watch. But yeah, that sparked a huge perspective shift for me after watching it.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, I think
I was
go
just
for
going to
it.
say like to that idea of, when you are young or when you've never done theater, when you've never, been behind the scenes of it, like there are props that are hand painted, by
Mhm.
many people. And there are things that are moved from one spot to another by someone. There's something that can only happen because two people had the skill set to do it. And, I think something that I try to do with when I teach kids is like, if we're doing a full show, we do all the costume design, all the prop, we do it all so that they can see how big the job is. It's not just about being on stage, and it's not just that these things happen. People who watch the movie and they're like, wow, those actors said some great lines. And you're like, how do you think they thought of them? A writer wrote
Right.
them. So yeah, I think that is an interesting connection point to that documentary video.
I also think that it connected what you said earlier, Eileen, which is if there's no that artist, whoever that was that created that chord, had to have a strong sense of themselves as an artist. That such a huge company like Disney that plays his shit every single 10, 12 minutes after a show. You know, that sense of ego or that sense of pride he had to look at that and say, you know, this is me, this is me, this is me, this is me. Or, you know, there had to be some sense of self that was okay with making that art and letting it go. Um, uh, Giving that to someone else for a greater purpose, for Disney, you know, you can argue that whatever that is. But as an artist, he had to say, this is mine and I'm giving it to you. And I think we all face that as artists where you know, if I go in an audition, I want it because I want you to see me. I want you to see me. I want to give you this because what I have to say should be seen as the most important thing or is the best possible version of this character. Um, um, and I have to remind myself, and you just reminded me with this that you just got to let it go. You got to let that go and let the work for you, because you'll get an opportunity and it will impact in ways that you can't imagine. And sometimes your name doesn't get repeated or remembered, but you have to, you know, it's important that as an artist, as you develop yourself, that you trust that what I'm doing is enough. Um, and maybe somebody will make a 90-minute documentary about, you know, me someday, hopefully. Um, no, I really like that. Um, Kelly, is there anything that you've seen or heard recently?
You know, this being sort of Chicago centric, this will probably be appreciated, but you know, the the center where I work, the market up here is primarily commercial. It's a traditional Broadway touring series, and we have done a lot of things in the last 6 years to sort of try to crack that model of what an art center can mean to its community, but people only have the context that they have. And so we started this little series called Widener Downtown, and it's in this funky little Art Deco space downtown that's like was a movie theater 60 or 80 years ago, I don't know. And the play was Every Brilliant Thing, which it's done lots of places. But we did it with a very, very tiny audience, 50 audience members at a time. Now in Chicago, there's 100 of those on Friday, you know. I hope that's still the case. And but the audience members, especially the younger audience members, and I would say 30 and under, just marveled at the fact that it sort of just this experience sort of just appeared out of thin air, right? This actor stood on a rug in the middle of this circle of 50 people and did this thing and created this shared experience with them. And I think for me it felt special in this community because there's sort of nothing if you're not in a dense urban center, it's very expensive to make theater like that because you have to bring people in from out of town. We don't have a deep well of local performers who could tackle a script like that. We were fortunate. We actually do have several professional actors who moved back to the area during COVID. And now I just
Yeah.
keep trying to like issue enough contracts to keep them here permanently.
Sneaky.
And I'm happy that that actor got those weeks, but I think that the profundity of the experience was much more about creating a different kind of theater experience than, you know, the 15 times they've seen Dear Evan Hansen in The Lion King. And I don't want to yuck people's yum, you know, like it's all good, man, but to be able to be a part of producing an experience that feels unlike anything this community has experienced before was really, really gratifying. And it did kind of take me back to those, you know, bookstore days and those, because for me, and I didn't answer this question earlier, but for me, like the thing that always feels magical is that stripped down, really intimate, deep well of talent and vulnerability on display. And the courage of that and the trust that gets built between audience and artist. And I haven't experienced that since I left Chicago. And so it was really special to experience it here.
Well, and that's, you know, again, the idea of what is theater for some people. When they think of theater, they think of a big Broadway house. You're, you know, dozens and dozens of feet away from the stage. It's a big production. Things are flying in and flying out, and that is theater. And like that's how a lot of theater has been done for a very, very long time. But also, yeah, theater can be someone standing on a carpet in an art gallery, and like, you know, the experience is not less meaningful, you know, it's still theater. And I think, again, people who maybe don't get exposed to it that much or don't have the access, don't live in a, you know, high urban environment, a big scene, you know, like Chicago, New York, Bay Area, Austin, it's like you don't realize theater could happen in a bookstore, in an abandoned hair salon. And I also think, because if you do think theater has this big distance, you also might think, well, I can't bridge that gap. You know, that's not something I can do. Or, well, this story is not about me because I'm so far away from it. Those people look different than me. I don't understand this experience, so I'm so far away from it. When you are up close and personal, physically and emotionally, it's hard not to empathize. You kind of just don't have anywhere to hide, as the performer and as the audience member.
Yeah. That sparked a thought for me, and thank y'all for bearing with me. I'm back on. I had an experience during my time where I was more actively an arts educator. Long story short, I was brought in to take over a class of preteen and teenage boys of color, all of color. And Jannard, you know this area, Fifth Ward, which is under redevelopment, aka some gentrification at this point. But that was during the time that it was, well, sometimes still now, the nickname for it is the Bloody Nickel. So this is an area that has a lot of poverty. Some people say crime, you know, whatever the case may be. So I was brought in, and the premise of the class was specifically Shakespeare. That was the premise. So I was told that the boys had behavioral issues, that like they just kind of had a distance from us, like they didn't get Shakespeare. I walk in and I'm just like, all right. This is what we're going to do. This is what we're not going to do. Like establishing boundaries, but also letting them know that I wanted to be there, and I wanted to be there specifically with them. Within maybe 2 to 3 weeks, and mind you, I only had them once or twice a week. I want to say once. Within 3 weeks, they were arguing and fighting over who was going to get to check out my books of sonnets that I would bring them for them to explore. We talked about Othello, and they were just like, man, I hate Iago. They did get it. It was for them, but it just took someone to come in with that accessibility point and not perceived barriers. It wasn't that they didn't get it or they weren't interested. It was that the approach was not meeting them where they were, and not in a way of talking down to them, but it was not being made interesting. You weren't. So I framed it like we watched some clips of O, the movie O, that's based on Othello. We watched some clips of that, but mostly of what we did for that specific play was in the original text. It's just that you had to make it appeal to them for them to see themselves in it, and then give them some leeway. So then I said, okay, gotta take some sonnets, and then you guys do whatever you want to do with it. If you want to do it as a rap song, if you want to do it as dance. One young man, this boy would be an amazing ballet dancer. His lines, when he would stretch his legs and do all of these beautiful twirls and stuff, were immaculate. So yes, accessibility is the thing. Some of us want to treat art like it's only for certain socioeconomic statuses or an income bracket, and it's not. It's not at all. That's why I'm infamous for saying art is the center of earth. You literally can't spell it without it. No matter your kind, your creed, your language, whatever, even from an academia standpoint, do your research. Every ethnic group and civilization had an art component. That's how we know what the Egyptians did, by looking at what they drew, their drawings, things like that. And so yes, that's, as you see, that gets my blood boiling, because when we look at our younger generations, if you teach them that something is not for them, then they have this distance, and we lose out on amazing male dancers that we could have, or amazing people of color or whatever else, who are and would be phenomenal at theater. So yes, to me, art is not a privilege. It's not for just enrichment. It is necessary, because for some people too, again, coming from a former educator, some kids I've taught English to kids who, like, it was their second language, or they barely knew any English. So I had to talk to them in English and Spanish. They hated their language classes until the days that I come in and we explore it through like folk tales and things like that from Mexico, or making it fun, making it interactive, and getting on their feet. And they go from that to wanting to volunteer for everything. They're trying more and everything. So art is such a tool that can introduce a person to themselves. It's such a tool that could show a person, or show the instructor, what that person's learning style, love language, communication style is.
Yeah.
That's my soapbox. I'm off. There we go.
I'll jump up there with you. I mean, I feel like I've won in auditions, had to train myself to stop looking immediately at, like, oh, where were they educated? Like, where did they get their MFA from? And I don't have my MFA. I'm not a fancy person, but it is like, oh, if I'm looking at that for their credibility, that already says something about who doesn't get to be included. And I don't have my MFA mostly because I can't pay for it. Like, that is a big barrier for me to go get it. If someone just wants to give me one, I will give you my mailing address. You can just mail me an MFA. I will take it. But I had to sort of get out of my brain of that being like something that separates people. And similarly with kids, like if I would have kids auditioning for things, some of these kids, one, are bilingual, trilingual, and also, like, some kids can't read as well as other kids. So I hand them a script and I say, okay, like, read this part. And they're not only trying to do the acting part of it, but they maybe can't cognitively be reading. And then there's shame based in that, of doing that in front of people. And so it just was like, oh, and that extends to adults and to seniors, and to, then if you open it up and you're kind of like, oh, if our space isn't accessible and we only have stairs, we don't have ramps, we don't have elevators, who are we telling? Like, what are we saying? Who's allowed in our space? Well, not people who, use a mobility tool. Those people aren't welcome. If people look around and they only see, one type of person, one age of a person, and you feel like, oh, am I maybe not included in this building, in this production, in this place? So yeah.
We used to have so many signals I mean, we have so many signals about who the art we make is for. And I think that, I referenced at the beginning of our conversation that a lot of the cracks were revealed during COVID of our entire ecosystem. And one of that is how we're funded. And too many institutions, especially entrenched larger institutions, are dependent on incredibly wealthy patrons who subsidize the operations of our organizations to such an extent that there is some amount of beholdenness that happens, and we end up making art for those people. And they all look very similar. And I'm hopeful that we're in a moment with things like the World Health Organization's recently published study about how impactful the arts are on building senses of belonging, mental health. There are hopeful trends that the arts are finally starting to understand that we need to start reaching out across to other sectors, to the health sector, to economic development sectors, and partnering so that we can make the arts more accessible and we can reject our historical models for how we get people paid to make it.
Yes, I think we're in a delicate time, in my opinion. So you referenced COVID, yes, because COVID kind of flipped our regiments and routines upside down. I think marginalized people always knew that these problems and these systematic, built-in, intentional barriers and issues were there, but without the voice, without the leverage. Feel like we can complain all we want to, and all we're told is to shut up, or you're only choosing to view it that way, or whatever. With COVID, kind of like no one was exempt in the pandemic. No one was exempt from potentially getting COVID. So it kind of, unfortunately, was a very dark way of humanizing everyone. And that's how that topic came up. So then you have more of the, and I say this as a person who does work centered and has education centered in diversity, equity, inclusion, access, and justice. So I'm not just a talking head here, but we see more of the percentages wanting to be increased, or quotas increased for diversity. But what is that? It shouldn't just be a checkpoint on a grant. It should not just be the people of color that are palatable to the powers that be. It shouldn't just be, let's make this less homogenous of white people. It's not just about race. It's different things that equate to diversity. I think that now that is quieted down now, and certain laws and things in certain states have kind of not required the DEI factor any longer. I think we have to be most intentional now, since it's no longer a trend or a phase. We have to be most intentional now to make that stick, make it stick and make it stay. And something that Eileen stated that I want to talk about, she referenced, some children or even adults not being able to read as quickly or as well, out loud as some others. So some of my work that I've started to do, and I explored it a bit for my PhD, is neurodivergence and the intersectionality of that and other things. Factually, we see more neurodivergent people in creative industries. But how many of us are really talking about that? Like, I'm talking about that not like from my lane of arts. It's from my other types of studies and things. It just happens I'm a gumbo and I'm going to bleed it over to different places. Also, when we talk about diversity, people of color, specifically Black people and specifically women, are statistically the largest population that is underdiagnosed or inaccurately diagnosed for neurodivergence, and dyslexia and ADHD and things like that fall under neurodivergence. So it's sort of like, if we're ignoring that and we're not training ourselves on how to adapt and interact with people who just have that difference. It's not a fault. It's not, it's like how I have two uneven dimples. It's just a thing. It's just a fact, right? A factor of that person. Then what are we really doing? If we think an actor is a poor actor because they're not good at code ratings and they don't have the resources to go get diagnosed or the knowledge to be able to advocate and say, I need a special accommodation because I have something that's considered disability, then what are we doing? So there's space for us to grow, as always with anything. And again, during this time, it's a delicate time where we need to really link arms and decide to be most intentional and be consistent with these thoughts of diversity and equity and inclusion, but also think about access and the justice component, because they all, it's like a spine. They are all interconnected.
Awesome. I just want to say, like, you know, with what everyone has just shared, you know, I know we all have always heard like the theater is the theater is on its way out. And I think that you know, if we bear this in mind, that we are able, theater is not for the privileged, theater is not an event, it is at the core of our humanity. That you can see a marvelous piece at a space as big as Chicago Shakes or as intimate as, you know, a bookstore, and have that same impact. Humans love being seen. They love seeing themselves. It's just, I feel, a part of our nature. And if we just continue to realize that it is much larger than ourselves, that it is much larger than what we've been taught, um, there if we can hold on to that, like I think that we can hold on to our institutions as theater, as we continue, you know, because I think even if we don't have the buildings, you know, you'll still be filming some sort of like theatrical event. People pull pranks on TikTok and Instagram all the time. That's in some degree theater. But I think just keeping in mind that we are larger and that we are bigger and more complex than we sometimes limit ourselves, or, you know, under the binds of a board or, you know, patrons. um I think there is hope. And I want to say we're very close to wrapping up. I've got some thank yous that I want to throw out really quickly. Number one is to Office Hours Global, Mondo Machine, KBH Media, and Guy Cochran for help making the technical parts of our show possible. Number two, Straw Dog Theater Company. What's up? We're run on a free theater model. We believe in access to everyone. So we invite our audiences to pay what they can so everyone is able to see the show. And we can't make that happen without donations. So if you want to donate to Strawdog, go over to the website, strawdog.org, /donate to help keep us running. Number three, Kyle, thank you for making this possible, and producing the show. He loves it when we say his name. Thank you, Kyle. Number four, we want to thank you guys for watching the show. We ask that you chime in, throw in questions, throw in people that you want to invite. And number five, I want to thank you, Dr. Sandifer, Chase, Kelly, Eileen, for being a part of the show and being a part of the conversation. I truly feel like hope in our theater when we have conversations like this, um, whether we're talking about the chords of a Disney song, or, you know, just how impactful theater can be, you know, teaching Othello to kids that otherwise could not be. Um, and before we head out, we just have a long running tradition where you guys throw out anything that you are watching, reading, that you think would be awesome for our viewers to see or hear. I will say I'm in a book club, and I'm currently reading The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store by James McBride. But in the near future, and I'll probably talk about in future episodes, I have to see some of these Oscar movies that I haven't seen. Zone of Interest, Poor Things,
That
and those are I know those are top on my list. And also the oh my God, what's the movie that the guy from Sideways?
The
Holdovers.
holdovers. Yeah.
Yes, those are the next few on my list. So I'll be more in discussion in a future episode about those things. But anything you get what anything from you guys?
I can recommend a book I just finished that I actually started several years ago, and I'm so glad I picked it back up. Called Braiding Sweetgrass, written by an Indigenous scientist, kind of talking about the need for humans to be in balance with our ecological system. It is um, inspiring and educational and makes you look at the world differently.
What was the title again? And if you have the author's name?
Braiding Sweetgrass is the name of the book, and her name is Robin Klimmerer.
Thank you. Awesome. Brandon Sweet. Grass. Robin Kimmerer. Chase.
um I guess this is more limited to the Chicago folks to consume, but um, uh, there is a play by a friend, Zach Barr, called New Oleana, which I was attended a reading of and was just really, really got me thinking. It's a play about, making theater and about, you know, uh, navigating the areas of optics and examining where we lose track of, like, you know being a good person versus looking like a good person, and how we explore that in a theater setting. It was a really, really fascinating play, which people in the Chicago area can see at Eileen's program, Fat Theater, on March 5th. If you're in the area, I highly, highly, highly recommend it. I'll also throw in another fantastic piece of theater that people can see in Chicago. Again, for like a little small space kind of intimate theater, there is a play called Muted by another Zach Piercy, that is part of Theater Red's new series of like new experimental works that is happening at the church on Bryn Mawr. It's opening this Friday. The play is called Muted. It is described by the playwright Zach Piercy as a human story for ghosts, where the ghost of a young girl is trapped in a college boy's dorm room, and she is struggling with watching life pass by her and trying to find a way to, find life again. It's really touching. It is non-linear experimental storytelling. It is intimate. It is sweet. It is awkward. It is bittersweet. And it's another fantastic example of moving pieces of art that can be had on a small budget in a non-traditional theater space. I cannot recommend it enough. This Friday, if you're in the Chicago area, like it's like the epitome of storefront theater. It's a great experience.
And it runs for
Awesome.
like 3 weeks, right?
Yes,
2 weeks, yeah.
exactly.
So there's lots of chances to see it.
And two performances per night. So you got a 7 o'clock show and a 9 o'clock show. So multiple chances to see it.
Awesome. Muted. Eileen.
Yeah. Well, and I will also plug that New Oleana is part of our a reading series called Fat Tuesdays, which starts next week, February 13th. There's 6 weeks of plays, Tuesday night, 7 p.m. at Burger Park. It's a free program, and all of the plays are about /for/by/ in regards to fat people and fat creatives. So yeah, very excited to kind of launch Fat Theater Project with that. We got a lot of good stuff. I will say, in terms of a book that I am not reading right now, but I am going to go and start rereading it again tonight, is I was reminded we had this project in college where you had to like give a presentation on a historical figure in theater. And for some reason, I took that as, oh, I'm going to dress up as Harold Clurman from the group theater in the 1930s. So
Excuse me.
I am not like an impressionist, but I like I like watched footage, and like I was like I had a VHS of him, and I was like, pausing, rewinding, and like doing a voice, and so my performance, not the best, but I am now going to go reread On Directing by Harold Clurman. Just a great guy. But yeah, I mean, I'll do it at a party. If somebody asks me, give me enough root beer, I'll do it.
All right, Dabrina, Dr. Sandifer, do you want to close us out?
Sure. So book-wise, I am going to start this book, I'm Not Yelling, A Black Woman's Guide to Navigating the Workplace. Again, leadership can sometimes be a silo, and no matter what we do, we have to pour into ourselves and find what represents us and tools of navigating it. So I recommend this to Black women, or any woman that's in leadership. They want to call us the capital B whenever we know what we're talking about sometimes. So that a show that I would recommend if people could get their hands on it. I know Mildred's Umbrella just did a debut of it here. It's entitled Oh, A Rhapsody in Divorce. It's the Odyssey reimagined. It's so good. The playwright, her name is Jamie Brandy. Again, Jamie Brandy. It is just man, it's not super long. It ran like 90 minutes here, but it's a solid show that I would recommend. Again, it explores divorce and blah blah blah, and how that is not like a monolith, and even when you want to get away from the person, it's sort of like there's a grieving process there, all that good stuff. Is super duper relatable, so I definitely recommend that.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. Those are our recommendations for the week. We will see you back next week on Valentine's Day. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you soon. Oh, those hearts. Crazy. Yeah, we're back. Thank you, 5.
Thank you, 5.
Thank you, 5.
Awesome.